This is the Ed Non-Tech Podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located on Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Matthew Stranick, and I'm in Kamloops, British Columbia, on the traditional lands of Tk'emlúp-te-Secwépemc within Secwépemc-Ulu, the traditional and unceded territory of the Secwépemc people. Hey everybody, wherever you are, welcome to the latest edition of the Ed Non-Tech Podcast. Dr. Matt Stranick and Dr. Doug Reed here with you. Glad you could join us.
Hello.
Yes. So, how's it going today, Doug? What's going on in your neck of the world?
I am loving the new adventure that we're trying here. This whole let's do it first thing in the morning instead of in the afternoon or in the evening. Right?
Well, speaking to today's topic, which I think I can safely announce at this point, we're taking not necessarily the final dive into the community of inquiry framework, but maybe, the first or the last of the deeper dives for now, I think it's fair to say, for the next foreseeable while. And this being on we've already covered, if you listeners who pay attention to this on the regular, and some of you perhaps who don't, will know that we've been talking about initially, sort of the COI framework as a whole, and then going through the past couple of episodes with the constituent parts, which is to say, we went through teaching presence, social presence, and now we're sort of at the the panacea, if you will, which is cognitive presence, which would be arguably to some, the purpose of the whole thing, which, whether or not that's true, we'll get into that. But in the spirit of, promoting good cognitive presence within this show, for me, I just get up super early all the time. I tend to be at my more energized and more awake. It's 6 a.m., just past 6 a.m. where I am here in BC. That puts it at about 10:15 for you, Doug, on the East Coast. Am I right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So for me, I've got my I got my coffee from downstairs in the Hyatt lobby. I've got my World of Hyatt branded water, which they kindly leave for me outside my door because I'm a member, and membership doesn't necessarily result in lower room prices, but you get some small perks like the branded water. Conducive to that as well is my CPAP machine, which you can see sort of over there. Whether, we talk about the benefits of having a fully oxygenated brain or not, and the effect on cognitive presence. Anyway, I digress. Doug, what was the motivation here? Besides the fact that we needed to do all three of them, we could have done something else today besides this. You were just trying to sort of score them all off at once, or how are we doing here, bud, with that? What was your thinking there?
Yeah, basically the DCOI MOOC with the Commonwealth of Learning wrapped up, and I wanted to make sure that was great. And the D is designing. Remember a couple of weeks ago, was it distance? Was it distributed? It was designing.
Okay, good stuff.
So I went and checked that out, and I wanted to make sure while it was still on the top of my head to get to this point, share it, and have these thoughts and figure out where we were going to head next. But I didn't want to have this hang on for a couple of weeks because I forget stuff. That's how my brain works.
Well, it's as per the age that we're living in with these machiney things with the world in our pocket. the cognitive function is a lot of it is distributed right now, to the point that George Siemens, he sort of famously or infamously sort of mentioned that cognition can actually reside within non-human appliances. And I don't know whether, that would be something that he sort of retains, 20 years or 15 years after the fact. But that's, one of his statements, I guess, that's out there. I can provide more context.
Yeah.
You can Google that. It's actually a thing, but yeah, anyway,
Yeah,
cognition.
I strongly disagree with that.
I think it was probably a bit tongue in cheek, but it got a lot of internet clicks,
Oh,
and it sort of led to.
And that's what George was doing at the time. So yeah, I get that. Right,
Yeah.
George was in my original, the first MOOC that I helped design. So
Oh, wow.
he was a good guy. He volunteered to help us out, which was cool.
Fantastic, man. And that was under the auspices of your doctoral study, was it not?
No.
Okay.
No, that was under the auspices of Athabasca said, "Hey, can you do this?"
A contract.
My buddy's doctoral thesis, and it's like, of course I'll help.
Gotcha. Pardon me. I don't I don't know the whole academic and professional thing, and nor would I expect you to know mine, as fully just yet. But we got weeks.
You haven't been to LinkedIn and memorized mine? I would be hurt if
I think with your LinkedIn, it's interesting. You actually have got your primary thing on LinkedIn as being a host of this podcast.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have your doctoral thesis punched in there or anything like that? Or
I thought so.
Okay. Well, cool.
Dig for some of that stuff. Like LinkedIn is for like business professionals first and everything else second.
Yeah, it's kind of true. But honestly, it's since we've kind of been moving this endeavor forward, including with that super snazzy digital business card that that you and so that kind of prompted me to sort of start collating and updating some things. And I went through sort of a friending spree. I went through a friending or connection spree on LinkedIn, and I went through a defriending spree on Facebook. So I ditched a lot of, weaker connections on Facebook. And then I started stocking up on connections at LinkedIn. And it's not just because I'm unemployed and have been for a while. I sort of
self-employed. I'm going to keep saying self-employed.
Funemployed.
Okay. Funemployed. Okay. Yeah.
Funemployed. Yeah, that's.
I like that better because I think you're still learning. I think you're still growing. It's just somebody else putting money into a T4 isn't happening right now.
I'm lower middle class. My background, so scarcity of financial resources is something that I'm used to living with comfortably, but it's also given me kind of a massive chip on my shoulder, which I struggle with, in terms of my own thinking. Which thanks for helping me check that.
I'm going to keep saying it over and over. So it's not meant to be rude. It's meant to be supportive. So
well, no, man, that's dope. And it's just so. This is where my lower middle class sense of being wronged comes to the forefront, because I've been going through the entire Thompson Rivers University, just person in procurement, the president, the vice president, connection, because Dr. Brett Fairburn, president of TRU, is now on my connections list. And I sincerely hope, Dr. Fairburn, it was very gracious of you to write and sign the letter wherein my tenure track appointment was not renewed. I hope you're listening to the podcast, and I hope you circulate it widely, my friend. Connection. There,
Yeah.
that's as low as I'm going to stoop on the course of this recording, dude. It's an interesting social world that we're in, and cognitively, it's a matter of getting the message out.
What you've also done, is you've also tied it to the natural world, right? You've done some pruning, and you've done some planting of new seeds, right? Because after this is over, I'm going out and I'm chopping some branches off an apple tree, and my kitchen is full of little pumpkin plants that are between like 2 centimeters tall and about 12 centimeters tall right now, and I can't get them out of my house for another 6 weeks. Man. So my kitchen's going to be obscene. It's just going to be it is a pumpkin patch.
That sounds fantastic, man. See, one of the things I like about this is that you help take my, kind of rambling bullshit and put some really nice framing around it such that it actually sounds like it, belongs, which is cool, which is part of this that I appreciate. So
it's what my PhD supervisor did for me, and I needed it so much, because when I was doing my research, getting ready to do my research, I was, you read the lit, you're putting your research proposal together and stuff.
Yep.
And I said, I found all this stuff, but I don't know what to do, right? Because I was in too deep.
Right.
And then he looked at it, and it took him like 10 seconds. And he's like, oh, this is your study right here. And I'm like, what? No, how is it? He goes, no, these are the factors. And as soon as he said those words, I was like, holy crap, those are the factors. That's all I need. I could design everything.
You were so up close to it that you could, to your own circumstances, to your own wealth of resources and learning, that you weren't necessarily able to see the forest for the trees.
And
so I dig your naturalistic metaphors, dude. That's quite good. And I guess that's actually a pretty reasonable segue into some of the functioning of the COI model. So in as much as, and my understanding of it's fairly dated at this point, but social presence sort of is a precursor to, teaching presence and cognitive presence in e-learning situations, being able to sort of allow people to feel like themselves, feel comfortable, and then, bring the thing forward. Teaching presence, being the aspect of sort of setting the tone, setting the curriculum, kind of guiding and facilitating things, and then cognitive presence, in that area of overlap where those things are working properly, helps, that's sort of the more tangible learning as such. All of which contributes to that nice sweet spot in the middle, which I would say, just thinking on it now, the next episode that we do on COI, whenever that happens to be, we should probably, just sort of aim to focus on, that area within the Venn diagram wherein all three are overlapping, the educational experience as such. So, anyways, we got it. Oh, and by the way, just happy Record Store Day. Today is Record Store Day, and I don't know. You got a record player there in your home, Doug?
I have 2.
Okay. Well, I don't know what your thing is today, if you got time amongst your garden work, but if you, or anybody who's listening for that matter, I suppose by the time they listen, it won't be Record Store Day anymore, but it comes along twice a year, once in the spring, once in the fall. And this is where, for those who don't know, all the record labels that matter, indie, major, and otherwise, kind of have some special releases that they only put out in physical record shops on Record Store Day. And you can, if you look it up, it's like Record Store Day each year, twice a year, and special releases. And it's meant to encourage people to visit their shops instead of just, going to Amazon or whatnot. So after this, later on, one of the reasons for me that I want to do this so early today is because later on this morning, I'm going to be meeting up with my friend that I visit here in Kelowna, and she's got a 13-year-old who is really stoked to go to Underground Records and Music here in Kelowna for the first time. Going to trade in some vinyl. Going to check the new record store day releases. She's 13 years old, and that's about how old I was when I went to Backstreet Records in Fredericton for the first time back in the day. And this is a kid who's like brilliant. She's into skateboarding. She's into electronics, and all this stuff. And she's really stoked to check this out. So happy Record Store Day 2023 spring, everybody, far and wide. There we go.
And I have two things I'm going to jump off.
Sure.
Somebody who shall remain nameless sent me a podcast T-shirt called "Today the Brunswick, Tomorrow the World." So
that's some sweet merch.
I am repping that podcast right now.
That podcast, you may not find surprising to know, was recorded nearly 2 weeks ago, and it's just waiting for the notes to be prepared on WordPress. Sorry, Dan. Dan actually we were supposed to record this weekend, but Dan's busy this weekend with other things, so that kind of gives me a bit of a reprieve. That's you got some that. Well, I mean, we're gonna do that with the ENT though. We're gonna do that with this. I think since you've kind of used the AI, that was an AI generated logo for the stickers. Yes, is that a sticker or a fridge magnet? That's a sticker, right?
No, it was 10 stickers for $1, so I figured why not dip my toe in for the whole $1.
Well, what you ought to do is we'll get to it, is just get that into a shared drive and whatnot. And again, like t-shirticize it, right? Or keychains, or ballpoint pens or magnets. Have like a mini conference kit based on that awesome AI generated logo. And I'm saying AI generated not to say that you lacked input or creativity. It's just that seems to be such a point of, it's like, I know that you're in higher ed right now, and I see these little things bubble up from people who are, friends of mine, past colleagues who are like working in the thing. And I'm like, this seems to be a point of pretty heavy discourse right now. And without going too far astray beyond what we already maybe have, what would you say, Doug, in terms of AI with regards to cognitive presence? Anything you care to think of there, bud?
I think we're getting to an end of the old way of doing things, and this is going to be a new tool to help as we adjust and move forward.
Okay.
Because right now, what we're doing for AI and how AI works, because even like the OpenAI president, the guy with the chat GPT, he has come out and said, we are approaching the end of this model for what this AI is. Do you remember back in World War II with the Enigma machines and how the Allies broke the Nazi code machines? Are you aware of that story at all?
Yeah. Okay.
And they ended up, Alan Turing and his team created this machine that ran all the possible combinations. It was like just a mass number crunching decrypting machine. That's what AI, the popular AI right now is doing. Okay. It's just tons of computing power, and they're just pounding it out. So it's not AI, right? It's not actual intelligence. It's just putting incredible amounts of computing into things, and these are the results. And the results are getting better, but it's not leading to intelligence. It's leading to us answering questions.
It's not a matter of sentient machines.
No, we're not. And they've admitted that they've gone down a path that won't lead to that. So there's going to have to be some backtracking and then head down some of these other paths that are a little harder, that aren't as sexy right now. But we'll get there.
And speaking of unsexy, Just as you were sort of, giving your very thoughtful, nuanced answer there, I punched in, I tried to look up that Siemens thing, and it was that I remembered. And the reason it resonated with me is because I did refer to it in my doctoral work and I was like trying to remember like how and what, and it was under the principles of connectivism. Now we haven't really spoken to connectivism as such on this show yet, although I'm sure we will. I don't know that it's necessarily a thing of the present moment as much as it used to be, but it was something that was sort of with the initial MOOCs, the initial massive open courses, so to speak. That was something that was like a learning theory that emerged as these courses were being provided by Siemens and Downs and other colleagues, particularly with the University of Manitoba original sort of before edX, before Coursera, before these consortiums sort of co-opted the term, these wide open distributed courses offered by universities, sometimes not, that just people could participate in. So among the principles of connectivism, there's a list of about 9 bullet points here, which I'll put them in the notes. I won't necessarily get into it here, but among those, it sort of puts out the tenets. Learning and knowledge rests in the diversity of opinions. Okay, that's fine. Learning is a process of connecting. That's also fine. The third bullet, learning may reside in non-human appliances, not cognition. So I was off there. So I guess on the basis of the fact that, AI algorithmically continues to add to itself, continues to take on new information to produce information, and it probably, it's trained to learn off of human queries to get more specific. Does that resonate or not really? Is learning a fundamentally human endeavor apart from media or machines or whatever we're calling it?
I don't think it's just human.
Okay.
Right? Because I have dogs, and they certainly learn. Right?
So,
like all kinds of things, like fish learn, like animals learn.
Well, what about non-human appliances?
No.
Okay. That's
for me. Like when I hear connectivism.
Yep.
What's that? What was that body of research about? People would feel the shape of the heads and tell how smart you were and tell what.
It's their physiognomy. It's a sort of antiquated notion that physical characteristics speak to. Yeah, and it was used to justify, colonialism and the horrible treatment of people from, Africa or non-European peoples, right?
Yeah. So I take that study, the craniology or whatever it's called. I take alchemy, right? Like let's turn lead into gold, and I take connectivism and put them all in the same category of give me a break. Right? It's
the overarching category. Give me a break. Yeah. So saith the Dr. Reed. Okay,
that's my humble opinion on it.
I think that sounds rather not humble, but nor are you reeking of braggadocio as of yet neither. So braggadocio.
Yeah, we can definitely do connectivism sometime, but there's a bunch of stuff that has been disproved. And there's other stuff that they claimed, and it's like, no, you don't get to claim that. That's already covered in other places.
I just feel like, as far as approaches to teaching and learning, for me, even if something is kind of misguided or, off base in some fundamental way, it's an opportunity to take it apart and enhance your own critical thinking on the subject.
Mm-hmm.
So a contribution has been made, even if it's to the extent that, taking these propositions and, following them and either proving them as being relevant or otherwise, right? Yeah, it's good stuff. Well, why don't we have a look here at what you prepared for the notes on pretty short order there. You put those together.
I had these. I had the actual literature chosen 2 weeks ago.
Good.
And it was just the digging in and the reading and picking out the bits was
on a Friday evening in PEI. That's what you were up to. That's decent.
My busy social life left me free to do that.
Well, it's I would say that's the harbinger of a pretty awesome domestic situation in your case, but that's neither here nor there. So you've got is it so the definition here of cognitive presence, was that from the DCI MOOC then, or
DCOI? The DCOI MOOC broke it down.
Okay.
And what I've liked is as I went through the literature and the stuff I picked starts with early Garrison stuff where he still and his co-authors are still feeling their way for what it's going to be, and the later stuff, the 2022 stuff, is we got it. This is what it is, and it was cool to see that. I felt like what's that guy's name, Sleeman, that found the ruins of Troy, where he just dug down and dug down.
I hope his name was Sleeman. That's a pretty good beer from Ontario, but anyway, that's it's
spelled different.
Okay.
Sechielman. I could be wrong about that. I just know that they dug down through all these different layers of cities until I finally got to the Troy from the Iliad and the Odyssey and stuff. So
decent.
So basically, cognitive presence has 4 parts. There's some kind of triggering event, then there's exploration, then integration, then resolution. Right? So there's the sense of, hey, what's going on? And then it's the sharing information, then connecting the ideas together, and then coming up with applying new ideas.
Right.
That's basically it in a nutshell. And I was really nervous about this one. This is why this one was last, because this is the one I had the least of a handle on, if that makes sense. Like the other ones I was more comfortable with, those concepts.
Yeah. Well, and I think maybe, this is sort of one which is on the face of it anyway, meant primarily, for students, right? This is, what you would tend to think that students would get out of it in terms of their own learning and whatnot. I would tend to think that in as much as the teacher is there to sort of facilitate and guide learning, and the students are sort of there to, help add to that, given the constructivist nature, I think that probably cognitive presence is very much to do with the teacher as well. You might not have, been in a student, formal student situation for a while, but I think this is something that speaks to what can happen with the educator as well, not just with the students, right? I think so. No, man.
Have you ever? Do you know much about like Reggio schools, like Reggio Emilia schools? The stuff that came out of the 1930s?
No.
It's very student centered.
Okay.
Right? And it was the students find interest in something and the teachers help support as the students investigate and do research into those concepts.
Well, that sounds pretty good. That sounds like that would actually kind of inform some contemporary education practices. I'm thinking like, what we have here in BC, the schools of choice, in as much as, things could be centered around a theme, which is, agreeable to students as a way to explore learning. Like in Kamloops, they have the Kamloops School for the Arts. They have, there's some kind of specialized programming that goes on there. So you're learning math perhaps through, musical training, right?
Yeah.
Notes and chords and time signatures and whatnot. So I think potentially what you just described sounds pretty cool, actually. Again, it's if appropriate scaffolding and appropriate,
yes.
I don't want to say boundaries, but the environment is set up in such a way where it's not, unstructured. People, I think, have a tendency to sort of see these student or, led or student choice based approaches as just being kind of like, well, where's the teacher? What's the teacher's doing? It sounds pretty easy. But in fact, it takes a massive amount of work to set that up in such a way that it's going to work properly. It's not just like, here's the book, read it yourself, or, you bring in the book and then tell me what it's about. It's way more, if you're doing it properly, I think there's way more to it than that.
Oh, so, yeah.
And
it's not an abdication of responsibility.
Exactly.
Right? You're building all the infrastructure as all the students are headed down, whatever. If there's 25 kids, there's 25 different directions they could be heading, and you've got to build the infrastructure for all of them at the same time.
To realize their full potential, right? And that speaks to the notion of individual learning. And it's also, comes to mind the thought that good design is invisible when it's working properly. So if, there's an illusion of lack of structure, it's simply that the structure is so ingrained, it's so entrenched that it's, manifesting in the activities rather than just like, playing ping pong, or Pac-Man or whatever, the whole class, right? So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm going to jump into the first Garrison one.
Please do.
It's the 2003 Cognitive Presence for Effective Asynchronous Online Learning. And what I loved about this is people see, in the olden days anyway, and they still today, they say, oh, online, you can't do this, you can't do that. And they're pointing out how the technology works and using that as a negative to complain about it.
Okay.
And Garrison has spun that on its head, right? The asynchronicity and the connective properties of online learning offer potential, right? It's like it offers potential for the students to be more reflective and collaborate in different ways. And isn't that wonderful? Like when you're in class, like when you're in a face-to-face class, it normally, like the psychologists say, when somebody asks you a question, sometimes it takes, like the average is 6 seconds to come up with a well thought out answer.
Okay.
And if you've ever stood and said, hey, you student, what's the answer to this? Do you know the average time that teachers spend before they move to the next kid?
Do tell.
Less than 2 seconds.
Oh.
So that first kid, that first student, right, maybe that's why it's the ums and the ahs to get started, because they need 6 seconds to process the question to come up with a real answer. So it's one of those, right, it's the second mouse gets the cheese kind of situations, right? All the other kids know, all the other students know what the question is going to be because they've already heard it. The first student's on the spot, might get it, may not get it, but the second one has a way better chance. And this, the way that there's like the time lag of the asynchronous component to it, gives everybody that second mouse gets the cheese kind of situation. Here it is, I get to think about it.
It's conducive to maybe more equitable footing between and among students. And I think asynchronous online is really, I mean, it's when it's done well, it's fantastic. It gives opportunities that other kind of learning contexts and situations, don't necessarily have. And we're talking about, I think especially in terms of accessibility. I think for students, with so-called special needs, or for those who really, want to take their time and sort of commit to those resources or engage with them in their own ways that are suitable for their learning, I think that that can really be a benefit in a lot of respects. So I think you're right on the money there, Bud, with the benefits that might be had there.
Well, and that's it. Like the students that do well in class, right? Those students always exist. There are those students that you're getting in the way of when you're an educator,
Yep.
Right? It's like, get out of the way. They're going to do it regardless of you.
They thrive in that particular setting. They're
Yeah.
good in person. They're good in being sort of in the moment. They got their ducks lined up outside of their lives in such a way. But I worked and sorry, not to just totally barge in, but like I worked at Ontario Tech University, what was then called UOIT, for several years, and it was like a commuter campus. It was sort of a second tier, and I don't mean that pejoratively.
No.
A second tier school within Ontario higher ed universities, and one of a lot of the student cohort, it wasn't necessarily the high flyers. It wasn't necessarily the ones that were going to go to U of T or Toronto Metropolitan University, as it's called now, Ryerson, whatever, back in the day. It's people who people who were going to be working, who had jobs, who had family commitments, and they're going to be driving into the campus. And it was the cohort was those who, have other things going on in a lot of cases in addition to their study. So for those students who are just totally, their lives are set up in such a way and their personalities are set up in such a way that they can just, hit the in-class experience with, both feet and really, thrive in that way, that, I think is increasingly rare given the situation that students are in now, given the nature of family commitments, given the nature of, employment and having to pay for things for yourself and other people in your life. So I think, again, the asynchronous online learning can, when it's being done well, provide equitability a little bit more through, for the student who really, we're doing this early in the morning, largely for my benefit, but, I know it's for both of us, but, for me, this is the ideal time. Somebody else's ideal time for their coursework may not be at 2 p.m. in the lecture hall. It may be that the only time that they're really free of their background thinking about what's going on in their lives or their work schedules and whatnot, their jobs, it may not be until 8 or 9 p.m. at night when they're finally able to get into their room or their home and sit down with it. So anyway, just kind of to give some examples there.
Yeah, and another example is, I believe a lot of people have heard the story about the student that was amazing in high school, right? The student that had the high marks and wow, they were a high achiever. They went to university and bombed in less than a semester, right? Like they couldn't handle the different structure. They had become so niche and so specialized in here's the high school structure and here's how I'm going to succeed, that as soon as that infrastructure changed, they couldn't cope. There was the being able to adapt didn't happen. And this is a way, this cognitive presence, the way Garrison's describing it, is a way that we can help everybody adapt better.
And this is exactly why it's good. I mean, it's not just, it's not just sort of a theory of learning, the way connectivism, may have been purported to be. It's actually, and this is why, Garrison and colleagues' work has remained something that's vital and people keep being drawn to it 2.5 decades later, is the fact that it's practical, it's actionable. There are guidelines which go from the framework to specific activities, that you can try, and you can get as granular with that as you want to. And there's the body of practice and the body of research is really there to support that. If for those who want to go into it. So again, I think everything you've said thus far is pretty spot on as far as that goes, my friend.
Well, that's part of what I like about academia, right? You come up with an idea and people work with it, and how malleable is it? Can they tear it apart? Is it worth something or not? And this has stood the test of time, right? And people have tried. So yeah, they came up with a good one, right?
Exactly
This
so.
makes sense.
And yeah, and I mean, there are lots of, permutations of this too. There are people, who have actually taken COI and then added, their own flavor to it and published
Yeah.
papers where, there's so in addition to what we've described, that we've talked about, we're sort of presenting through these episodes. I don't want to say the vanilla COI or the mainstream COI, but when I was doing my doctoral research, and again, I'm sure that more examples of this have come up, but certain, papers were published wherein they're like, well, what about, they proposed a fourth element called learning presence, okay, which, I was obliged to speak to in my lit review, but again, it speaks to the vitality and the strength and robustness of the, mainstream COI, that these kind of variations can come in as suitable for those practitioners and researchers in their own contexts. And, it adds value. It's not threatening in any way. It's just like, oh, well, what about this? What if, again, I think it's just one of the cool things about higher education that this kind of thing can happen, honestly. So,
yeah, you put a bunch of people together with a whole bunch of time, and they make things better. Isn't that kind of the point of a community?
Well, and that I guess to kind of I like your thing here, Kanuka and Garrison from 2004. So
Yeah.
we're going back 19 years. Cognitive presence is the extent to which learners are able to construct meaning through sustained communication. There's a lot in that, and it's also to me very it's got the appearance of like almost like a Zen kind of comment, wherein on the face of it is very simple, but there's actually a lot going on. Moreover, cognitive presence is the key element in critical thinking, a necessary element for higher levels of thinking and learning. So if you want to think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or if you want to think about Bloom's taxonomy, wherein you kind of got higher order and lower order cognitive tasks. I like that quote that you put in there because it encapsulates the need for critical discernment in being able to achieve those higher levels. So
there's another quote. I'll have to add that to the document now, but it's
okay.
Nobody can force you to learn, but if you decide to learn, nobody can stop you.
I think you could also have the graphic of you can bring a camel to the water, but you can't make them drink.
That's exactly where, I was going to say horse, but it's the exact same thing.
Yeah. And I like the camels because I lived in the Middle East for a while, and they got those large fatty deposits on their back, which are effectively food and water, containers for the distance treks. Yeah, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the Garrison Kanuka article I really liked because it highlights critical thinking, right? If people don't want to learn, there's no way. You just can't do it. But people that do want to learn,
well, those
are the people I can work with.
Well, it's sort of like, it's like you paid your tuition, you're not really doing anything. It's like, why are you here? It's like, well, everybody's got a motivation to be involved in higher ed, and for some, the learning aspect of it is entirely secondary or not on the radar. And honestly, I mean, it's not even a matter of, some motivations are better than others. It's a matter of relatability. So, what are you going to do within your role as an educator, for those students who just, are patently not there, if they get some learning, great, but it's incidental. You can respect their purpose for being there, but as you say, I mean, you can only reach those who want to be reached. So,
I had a person that I was dealing with. They were a student, and they said if it wasn't for sports, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't care. Right. I came to this country to play sports at this institution. I do
Good.
not care about learning.
Good level of self-awareness there. I mean,
Oh,
at
yeah.
least, it's like, okay, you've given us something to work with now. So, and this is a case where, what you just sort of were talking about earlier in terms of, letting students sort of have agency over what and how they learn. I mean, my kids are way deeper into sports than I ever was at this point,
Right.
Including my 13-year-old who's in Prince George this weekend for a basketball tournament. And I mean, his academics are fine, but I'm also aware that through the paradigm of sports, he's learning a lot of higher cognitive tasks, strategy, teamwork, all the miniature, mathematical and spatial kind of relationships that go into, getting the ball in your hand, moving it down to the opposing side of the gym and getting it into the net. I mean, geometry, trigonometry. I mean, one of the most famous approaches to basketball is the so-called triangle, offense, the triangle approach, which was notably employed by the dude who coached the Chicago Bulls during the Jordan years through, multiple championships when they were just unbeatable in the NBA. That was his starting point, the triangle approach to basketball. So
the Zen master that went on to the LA Lakers.
Yes, and we're both failing on the person's name, which but still, right? That's so.
You can add it to the notes.
I recommend, and I don't watch Netflix almost at all. The only reason I even have a subscription to Netflix is for my kids and my ex-wife, who still uses my password on it. The Last Dance, the multi-part documentary about Michael Jordan's run with the Bulls and the teamwork and such. That's actually
Bill Jackson's name.
Bill Jackson, right? Thanks, Phil. I don't suppose you're listening to this, but we want you to we want you to listen. Yeah, and for those who so there's so much going on, and if you were to say, okay, well, how about you take certain course options wherein you're so you have to take your arts elective. Well, what about a sort of program of self-study wherein you can just theme it all around basketball? Or what if you have certain enlightened instructors who will say, okay, will allow you to take the curriculum points and attach them to something that you are specifically interested in, such as, your sports thing that you came to this country to participate in. Whether or not that would make a difference, maybe up for debate, but it could move the needle closer, than otherwise. So
we do that now.
Okay.
We do that now.
Some of us
but
do.
It's not financially viable to do it for everybody.
Okay.
Right? Like,
fair enough.
You did your doctorate.
Yep.
Right? And did somebody say you have to do this? You had flexibility in there to build and create and explore on your own.
So I'm thinking for undergrads primarily.
Yes. And that's the financial part. That's the part where
a lot of people
can't do it for hundreds of thousands of people. Sorry.
Well, and I mean, there are some places I think that some institutions there are some specialty programs that I'm thinking at University of Brunswick in Fredericton, where I grew up and where I did my master's. They had sort of a program called Renaissance College, which was sort of for those who maybe weren't going to be as successful as they could have been with the mainstream kind of offerings. It was more of an arts-centered thing, but it was more of a thematic and seminar-driven approach to undergrad education. And I'm aware, some people went through it and it worked real well for them. But then others, did want the majority, I guess, of students and their parents who pay the tuition, very, very important in a lot of cases. They are after maybe a more traditional experience. So one of the great things about COI, just to kind of bring it back, is that it makes a lot of the options explicit. It makes, for educators who choose to sort of follow it up, gives you more of a toolkit wherein you can maybe customize things a bit, whether for the group or for individuals within the group as kind of a matter of outreach, or trying to help people achieve at their highest possible level. At least that's what I kind of think about it, which is one of the reasons it was appealing to me in the first place. So.
Yeah, I'm with you. It just, you said tradition and it drove me bonkers.
Quote, but I put the air quotes around it. Or
no, but for sure. But if you take a look,
yep,
that Renaissance College thing you described, is it Renaissance College? That was the right word? That was traditional until it wasn't. And then now we have our mainstream thing, which people are saying is traditional, but they're actually ignoring the older tradition. So they're cherry picking what they want to be tradition.
Right. And I'm looking at it now, and I just Googled it because my knowledge of that was, pretty old. And I just, it actually is still a program that's being offered. So I'd
love to teach in that. That would be awesome.
Yeah. So it's just looking at the landing page for it. It's sort of putting out something where make the degree your own. So you can choose to do it in 3 or 4 years, 40 plus minors to choose from, smaller cohorts, 30 students. So it gives it leads to pretty specialized credentials. There's not necessarily that many degrees ultimately to choose from, but it does favor an inquiry and seminar and sort of student self-selecting kind of approach, maybe more so than just your traditional, major with required coursework and then a few kind of electives to support that. So I think it's cool that the variety and the options can be there, I suppose.
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Love hearing stuff like that, especially after this MOOC, this DCOI MOOC, where we had people from across the world and all their education systems were different. There were similarities, but there was also those differences. And it's like, yeah, it's working for them there. How did we end up here, right? And that, I just like the history and exploring all that kind of stuff.
Well, and it's important to know too that, I mean, when we are talking about the Canadian and I guess largely Western, model and approaches to higher ed, we are talking from a position of significant privilege, and a lot. So a lot of the approaches, whether it's Asia, whether it's other environs, they still, whether it's through cultural norms or just a matter of I don't want to say not having gotten as far with pedagogy and training and whatnot, but it favors a more didactic teacher is the center of the locus of control, and the student is more of a passive / obedient supplicant within that context. So for international students, a lot of the time, I think when they come to Canada to study, that may be part of an adjustment, in as much as we have, again, a privileged position of being able to speak to this wider open approaches to teaching and learning vis-a-vis this practice and literature. It hasn't necessarily reached the level of practice in a lot of other spaces because their concerns are more immediate. And a lot of that, I think, is ultimately tied to the disparity in geopolitical power and financial agency of a lot of these other places. So I think that actually, in a way, gives us more impetus to try this stuff out to reach these students as well as others to the full extent possible. And asynchronous learning vis-a-vis cognitive presence is supportive of a multiplicity of approaches, because if the resources and learning activities in the online environment are set up, appropriately, then, in theory, those students who sort of learn more by rote, more didactically, whatever, they can still find fulfillment through that approach, to the, as well as other, among others in the cohort. I don't think I expressed that very well, but does that make a lick of sense there, bud?
It does, because this takes us to the Moore and Miller article, the Fostering Cognitive Presence in Online Courses, a Systemic Review.
Yeah.
They basically, I included this one because they had a fantastic diagram. They took the trigger, prevent, exploration, integration, resolution. It was just a really nice diagram that I didn't see anywhere else in the literature, so I assume they made it themselves for whatever.
It looks like stair step made of books or something like that. It looks awesome. Yeah, man. It's good.
Yeah, it shows here's where we got to go, and it's the reverse, right? Like triggering is at the bottom, even though phase one is often at the top. No, resolution is the top of the stairs, but they basically call out for, please share more practical examples. Right? It's like, yeah, there's all kinds of theoretical talk. Yeah, we get it. What are you actually doing? Give us the actual specifics. You got to publish those specifics. Stop talking in circles.
Yeah, and truly, I think, going into Google Scholar or library databases, COI, like if you were just to punch in COI and science education, or COI and business education, COI and whatever, if it falls out so far outside the purview strictly of e-learning, and teacher training and education, that case studies, practitioner action research, and other kinds of studies are there to be had more, as per individual disciplines and as per different contexts. And it's something where I think COI is also conducive to teacher-led research, so-called action research education. Because the conceptual material of COI is so it's unburdened by a lot of terminology and jargon. It tends to be straightforward. The visual of it, the Venn diagram with attendant categories and such, it's all pretty straightforward conceptually, and so it lends itself to those kind of more niche and direct student, and educator-led kind of research contexts and settings. So I think that's part of why it's remained as viable as it has for as long as it has, and probably why it will continue to be for the duration of our careers anyway, if not longer.
Yeah.
So
just for, if you go to Google Scholar and look up communities of inquiry, it's over 2.2 million articles. So it's robust. It's out there, and I grabbed 4.
Right, 4, 0.000 whatever amount.
The number
of all
is
of them.
small.
Yeah, and it's hit the point of exponential growth, because each of those articles and each of their attendant reference lists, begets more, just through natural growth of these things. So,
and this leads to another reason why the Moore and Miller article was so nice to me. It was a systemic review. When I was a full-time researcher, 2 of my favorite phrases were meta-analysis and review of the literature, because somebody already did a bunch of the work, so let me go see what they looked at. And it just reduced the amount of what I had to do. It was so nice. I just loved those phrases.
It lets you sort of focus on your forward-looking thought, maybe a little bit more than just trying to kind of scope out what's already been covered. Yeah, that's
yeah. Why reinvent the wheel? I don't have to learn how to make fire, right? We figured that out, right? I don't have to learn how to make a wheel. I don't have to invent one. We learned how to figure that out. Why wouldn't I use what other people have done?
Exactly. No, for sure. And I think that's actually a pretty good way so you mentioned about the specifics through, the need for specifics in the Moore and Miller article. You've got this pretty awesome table here, strategies for designing learning activities to enhance cognitive presence. Is that from? Yeah.
That's on purpose. That is from the Marana, Willison, Joka Mosovic, Paramang, and Constabile, Factors that Influence Cognitive Presence from AJET, the Australian Journal of Educational Technology. And yeah. I tried, it's almost like I did it on purpose, right? It's somebody saying, hey, give us more details. And then I went and found an article that gave more details. Hey, do this, and here's where they found it. It was so nice. And this is only one. They have a bunch of tables like this in the article that are fantastic.
Well, and I like the two columns in as much as you got the learning activity, which is, that's in itself is pretty rad. But then each of them has got references wherein those are drawn from. So you can feel confident acting on those strategies that they are in fact supported by literature. They are in fact supported by critical discernment and peer review, which is all pretty important to the academic thing, right? So
it's not just that; it's also important to practitioners.
Yeah,
right? It's like, where did this come from? Because I have had people in meetings say, "Oh, why don't we do this?" And it's like, "Are you on drugs right now?" Like, no, that's ridiculous. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do the other thing. Well, no, baby. It's like, you find me 2 practitioners that do it, or you find me 2 articles that says that, and then we can have this conversation. And of course, it's the BSers that are just making stuff up to fill time in a meeting. But
yeah, that's I don't miss that part of the job. I gotta say, I'll just honestly. Yeah, man. Well, that's all good. So,
and this AJET article also, I compress their teaching practice implications. Right?
Okay.
These were all headings, and they have all kinds of details into the things that are going to impact teaching practice.
Oh, so each of these each of these numerals here, like for instance, number 1, higher education students enrolled in online courses should be taught how to learn effectively in the online mode. That's awesome in and of itself, but I guess what you're referring to then is within that reading, the article this is drawn from, there would be quite a bit more on that particular heading or that particular point, right?
Yeah, like I just love this article. I just like AJET because I studied in Australia, right? I'm biased, and I'm okay with that.
Well, it's your home turf in a way, right? In a lot of respects.
So like online educators must embed learning tasks that foster self-regulation and higher order skills in students. It's like, this isn't really a news flash, right? But we've been doing it face to face. But did people say, "Oh, we also need to do this online"? Right? It hasn't been explicitly stated and explored.
I think there's so much sometimes perhaps cognitive dissonance or perceived challenge just in learning the requisite technical skills to accomplish that online, that just getting something online, in some way is in itself considered kind of a victory, when in fact, apart from the fact, like, it's like, why use a learning management system, besides just as a container for your stuff? It's like, well, you can actually enhance the overall quality of learning through some of the affordances that the online environment, whether it's open web or LMS or whatever, can provide. So it's we kind of have maybe a reactive model of dealing with things when it comes to e-learning in higher ed, in as much as we sort of problematize it. We sort of say, well, it's good, you're going to have a challenge with this, so let's deploy our e-learning resources and personnel as sort of a Band-Aid kind of approach, just,
Mm-hmm.
Solve the ticket, that comes in through the help desk, as opposed to here are some pedagogically cool or innovative things that you might try. I know that kind of coverage exists, and I know that teaching and learning units and some learning tech units are doing a great job of that. My sort of most recent experience was tending to be more reactive than proactive. But again, I got voted off the island, so I'm not somebody to really speak to it from a full standpoint, or a standpoint that isn't intrinsically biased. But I think the point remains that, if your first thing is just like, does that make a lick of sense, bud?
It does, and it comes back to another one of my biases. Like, I studied online learning.
Yeah.
Like, I did research in it, and I studied it, and it matters to me. And the pandemic happened, and then the pandemic pivot where everybody got pushed into LMSs. That's not online learning. And people are patting themselves on the back saying, "Oh, I taught online. I know how to do it." It's like, no, you don't. You pivoted.
You got things into the container successfully, which in the moment is important. But if that's all you're going to do with it, then, I mean, you may as well almost pivot back to what you were doing before, almost.
And I see people doing that. Like, I see people patting themselves on the back for getting stuff into the learning management system. And it's like, okay, so you woke up and got pants on and brushed your teeth, and you think you've accomplished everything for the day. You
managed to upload some files into a designated spot in the university network or whatever.
It's if you want to claim that's online learning, you're just wrong. And I'm not an absolute guy anymore. I used to be, and that didn't help my life very much. So now there's a lot more gray in my life, but some things are just
not just on the hairline neither. Yeah.
I'm happy to have hair. I'm happy to have hair. That's where I'm at. So basically, those are all the bits for COI, like all the articles.
And we got some very dope illustrations, which we're running a bit long here. I think maybe some of these can probably. Oh, and you got the scan code. You got the QR code for the podcast glued in here.
It's so pretty. I just couldn't resist.
So if I point my phone at this now, that's going to bring me to the online card. Is that the idea?
Well, give it a go, man. Give it a go.
Well,
and while you give it a go, I've got my digital pack rat. I found when not enough design goes into cognitive presence, it reminds me of this Dilbert cartoon, where Dilbert hands the bare minimum budget I need for this project. And the boss is like, "What could you do with half this amount?" Fail. And then the boss is like, "When can you start?" And he's like, "I think I just did." Which is what happens when, like, educators just abdicate their responsibilities for what they need to do.
Educators abdicating responsibilities. It's something else to speak to. Okay, and and more fully and at length, I think it's like, why would you choose to do that when you got so many other options? But I can now confirm that slick, sharp thingy here, actually, QR code works. And man, it's up on my phone now, and I'm really quite partial to that graphic, dude. That's
And what I'm not really shilling anything, but the one spot people, Tanya, I worked with in Vernon, and her guy Evan, they're both amazing, and they built digital business cards, which are really cool. And I said, can we convert it into a podcast thing?
Yeah.
And they figured out how to do it, and I think it looks just as slick as can be. So
yeah, we got like a representative. We got the it's all on one spot. You don't have to do the scroll of doom to catch any of it, and it's got the latest clicks to get into the full Spotify and YouTube, and you can preview them or watch the whole thing right there. So that is absolutely slick. So good job to our colleagues in Vernon. You've got a very cool service here, and we we strongly recommend it. So only in as much as,
And on top of that,
yeah,
it's a short little URL, right? oyos.ca/EnT. And when it comes to like putting stuff on Twitter or other social media when we're advertising,
or a
it takes
t-shirt,
way less space. Yeah.
or when we do those, yeah,
When we do the t-shirts, yep.
Yeah, a more simplified URL, more memorable, more, yeah, no, I think actually now that I'm thinking about it, when it comes time to actually do the t-shirt, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yep.
I think that scan code is going to be printed on the back of the t-shirt, come to think of it. So
that would be cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got 3 little things, and then we're done. Word of the podcast is practitioners, because this is about all the other stuff that practitioners and educators have to do. Phrase of the podcast is review of the literature, because man, I just love seeing that when I was looking at the literature.
Love a good review of the literature. Absolutely.
And the question for the audience is, are we designing to reduce cognitive presence in our teaching? Because I've seen so many classes where they've gone the wrong way. They're reducing cognitive presence as opposed to trying to create more.
There's a lot to be said for making information accessible and paring down from among all the content that's possible. Making it more straightforward in that regard, but you got to be moving. You got to use that as an opportunity to move upwards in the learning realm, as opposed to just sort of leaving it at that point, right? It's man. And this is FYI, the first phrase of the podcast. So we've just. For those of you who track this stuff at home, we're adding to the format in ways subtle and perhaps more explicit as we go. So kudos to Doug for coming up with that, as well as initiating this whole fantastic online business card thingy for the podcast. That is absolutely dope. So anything else?
One last thing. And it has nothing to do with the content of this podcast.
Okay.
It was about a year ago last year that we started communicating on Facebook about, hey, maybe we should do this podcast. So this is a very unofficial anniversary, but hey, look what we did.
Bottoms up. We did. Well, and I just, apart from the fact that we've kind of gone from being, colleagues to friends with colleague, attachments through this, which is valuable. Is for me, this just adds this whole dimension to this period of self-employment or fun employment or whatever you call it, where I can actually point with a good amount of confidence. It's like, okay, this is a tangible thing in both its content, but also in the format that speaks to our values, our shared and respective values as people who are involved in this stuff. So if you want to know, what are these guys about? What's important? These talking heads. It's like, I think if you look at things like the digital business card, if you look at the way that we've been setting up the WordPress elements, if you look at the fact at how we're sort of trying to run video as well as audio equally robust, and just all these kind of tweaks and things that go into it, you're going to see pretty clearly what we're about as people and as educators through this. And I hope that encourages people who are looking at this. If you are thinking about doing some kind of online thing, that it's really just a matter of starting to do it, and then with each successive iteration, it's going to become more important, more viable, and you're going to feel more confident about it, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
So
it's It's the same as when you write a paper or you write a story or you write a poem. You write first. That's the hard part. Edit
That's right.
later.
I with the tutoring that I do at the writing center, a couple times a week, throughout the regular academic year, a lot of the time I'll just put on the student's paper. You've achieved the toughest part, which is just sitting down to do it. At this point, by the time it reaches me, it's the hardest part is usually over, and it's just a matter of taking what's there and refining it. So. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we got anything else here as a final thought, Bud, or how are you feeling now?
That's it. I'm about to go outside and burn some tree branches or do some pruning. So just thanks for doing it this early in the morning. This has been a very interesting experiment. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think we may aim for this again, just because it's conducive to the cognitive life, at least for me, to kind of, I'm firing a little bit more fully, I think, earlier in the morning. So I'm going to go out to Underground Records on Ellis Street in downtown Kelowna here in a few hours once they're actually open. And I wish you all a happy record store day, which is about the closest I get to having a real secular holiday that I can stand behind, so.
And next week is Free Comic Book Day.
Whoa.
They have special comic books that they give out at comic book shops. So next week is first Saturday of May.
Nice. So, excellento.
Anyway, I'm going to stop talking.
And so am I.
Everybody, a good day.
Yeah, take care, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening. Bye for now.